So this is a quick look at how to send reverb to a monitor mix using the GL2800 Allen & Heath mixing console and the Yamaha SPX, which is stage left here in the venue at SSR. So here's the setup then. I'll be just working with one input signal for this example. It's a vocalist and it's just playing back from Pro Tools, and here it is on input 1. Job number 1, of course, is to gain up that input signal to read 0 dBu sort of average, and just coming into orange occasionally into the +6 sort of region. Healthy signal. We use these mix sends to send to on-stage monitor wedges. Typically the setup here in the venue is 4 mix sends to 4 on-stage monitor mixes. For this example, we're just using mix 3, which I've turned round, so we've just got it pointing at the mic for this example. So, gained up, nice. These mix sends are post-fader sends, so this fader needs to be raised. So this is the lead vocal going to all of the mix sends if we fade some up into the mix. So this kind of acts as a master. So if the vocal suddenly becomes hot in all of these mix sends, we have this master control of that instrument going to all of the onstage monitor mixes. But typically we would want this at 0. And then in terms of how much you can send from one of these mix sends, you should be able to send certainly 12 o'clock, maybe somewhere up to 2 o'clock if the positioning of the lead vocalist mic is good, into a decent quality on-stage monitor wedge. I will just leave it at 12 for now, being as though I'm right next to this monitor wedge. And then if that's mix 3 send, then the mix 3 master would come up like a pocket to 0 and no more than that because it's right next to my ears. Okay, so that is the dry signal. When it comes to sending reverb out of the Allen & Heath GL2800 or any monitor console in the analog domain for that matter, we are going to use it's a send and return setup. It is a mono send stereo return situation. Cables that you'll need would be 1x female XLR to 1x balanced 1/4" jack. So you just pick a mix that you're not using. So if you're using 1, 2, 3, 4 for on-stage monitor wedges, then 5 would be the next available one. So at the back of here, we would go out of mix 5 and into the SPX Yamaha. Its input is on 1/4" TRS, hence this cable. On the return leg, we then need to bring it back out of the effects unit using another 1/4", and I've just extended this cable so it'll reach to a later fader. Quite often I put it up that end of the monitor's console because you're going to be using these for direct inputs from stage, but just because this is the only part of the console you can see at the minute, I'm going to go into channels 15 and 16. And it is a stereo return, so another one, another one, 16, and that is out of the right-hand side output of the SPX. All right, so all that really remains is, can we hear this wet signal in the lead vocalist monitor wedge, and how much wet do we balance against the dry? So just a reminder, here's the dry signal. It's mix 3 is this monitor wedge. Okay, so keep that down a second so I can talk over it. If we use mix 5 as a send, we can see that some signals being sent to the SPX via mix bus 5 and being returned to inputs 15 and 16. So we've made these an effects return, effectively. So then all we've got to do is use mix 3 to send that wet signal back to the lead vocalist's monitor wedge. In terms of where to put these pots, if we faded these up to 12 and faded the mix 5 send up to 12, we could very easily have a situation where we've almost got 50% wet with 50% dry, and that most likely would be just a washout of reverb, way too much reverb, most likely. In terms of how much wet signal to balance against the dry, well, I mean, go off what your artist, what you interpretate that your artist wants, or they may be specific, depending on their experience working on stage, I suppose. Suffice it to say, though, 50% wet to 50%, half and half, is going to be most likely way too much wet. So bearing that in mind, let's not be looking at fading these up to 12, but let's try and put our pots in a sensible position, both in terms of signal level, but also with a quick glance of the desk, we can see whether things are off or on. If you work within these real lower parts of the turn, these lower parts of the logarithmic scale, two things: it gets really faffy and fiddly and hard to find a bite point, and even on an analog desk it can get a little bit crackly down there. And then secondly, it's at a quick glance difficult to see what's going on. So for that reason, I would encourage these effects return faders. We can go to -10 because we're not going to want unity gain of wet signal with unity gain of dry signal. We're going to most likely want less wet signal in most cases. And then with the mix 3 sends from the wet return inputs, quarter turns. Anywhere between a quarter turn and maybe 3 p.m, so 9 a.m. to 3 p.m, is a sensible place to work with a pot. It's possible to find the bite point without getting stuck in this faffy little area down here. Even quarter turn, we'll know less than a quarter turn at least. Anyway, so dry signal.
Like a pocket knife.
And then fading some of mix 5, the effects send up.
From the time I fell from all the struggling. If you wanna make a point, then you gotta have an edge. If you wanna make a point, then you gotta have an edge.
I'm metering some slightly lower level here, and that's mostly just because I've attenuated things slightly because I'm really close to the monitor wedge. We would be looking for healthy greens on here. And just finally for now, we go into parameters of reverb as the module progresses, and we spend a lot of time front of house looking at that in particular, and the same understanding of reverb and time delay effect parameters will put you in good stead for doing reverb down in monitor world as well. So more on that on a future occasion. It's worth saying though that with the SPX units, you can usually get a good starting point out of some of the presets, some of the plate presets, and maybe some of the small rooms are quite a good starting point, I find, for putting reverb or the parameters of reverb in lead vocalist's monitor wedge. This in particular, Reverb 3 Room 1, seemed to be a workable starting point, and then you can go in and edit parameters after that. But more on that on a future occasion. For now, whilst we're around the front, just worth pointing out input signal level into the reverb, and this is something that you would want to be doing as part of the gain structure we were talking about before. It's just I was around the other side of the desk, so I couldn't really point it out at the time. This is full-scale digital metering, so 0 dBu on the Allen and Heath down there, analog console, would be, if it's calibrated correctly, -18 here on the front. So -18 average. Obviously, this would appear to be quite a dynamic vocal, and therefore that's why we look for -18. We need that headroom to encroach into with the big moments of the voiceover. So this is input signal level. Well, it's not gone beyond -6, so we wouldn't want to be boosting that signal in terms of input level any more than that, basically.